Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you're asking a question, what is the show all about? Well, we take a look at a lot of the inequities that people face. We promote different points of view, promote civic awareness, engagement from the community, and then we have some very exciting guests. We expect you to stay tuned to us right now because the Social Justice Forums begin right now. And welcome back. The Bronx Community Foundation is the first and only community foundation in the Bronx solely dedicated to delivering resources to the borough. By enabling collaboration amongst residents, community organizations, and institutions, as well as engaging elected officials, the organization strives to fill those gaps to improve the quality of life. Joining us now, we're pleased to have on the show the Bronx Community Foundation President and CEO, Dr. Meisha Porter. And Dr. Porter, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, well, excited to have you. And for those that may not be familiar, the Bronx Community Foundation really is an arm that really pumps gas into much of the community and a lot of the organizations that the Bronx serves. So talk to us a little bit about the Community Foundation and the work that you do.
So, I mean, I think you did a great job of kicking off who we are. And we are the first and only community foundation in the Bronx. And, you know, it is about time for the Bronx to have the things that exist in every community. And it's really important to note the foundation was founded in 2017 and ideated by our founders, Derek and Desmond Lewis, who are from the Bronx. But as the pandemic hit, we sprang into action and distributed millions of dollars in resources, including meals, grants to small businesses, technology to schools, funding to justice-involved Bronxites. We supported housing groups and hospitals and directly provided funding to residents. And now we are at the crossroads of the foundation where we are ready to be a distributor of resources Bronx-wide to ensure that folks who are proximate to our community's problems or concerns or proximate to the solutions actually have resources to make those solutions a reality.
And when we talk about reality, I want to talk about the reality of COVID, because COVID has been what we're still dealing with and still trying to overcome. For a lot of residents, the struggle is real, whether it's food insecurity, whether it was vaccination hesitation, those things have been real. But then also for organizations themselves with boots on the ground, some of them are almost forced to close their doors. Some of them saw a lack of services. Talk to us about the work that you've done in sustaining and really upholding these during this time.
Well, some of the work that the foundation did during that time was supporting nonprofit payrolls, supporting small businesses, and really trying to ensure that we kept our businesses and especially our nonprofits going. And I think it's important to note tomorrow's National Nonprofit Day, and we're celebrating that day with the Borough President's Office, Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, and our Comptroller, Brad Lander. And what we did in the pandemic was to continue to support nonprofits so that they could continue doing their work. But what's important about tomorrow is the celebration. We call them nonprofits, but what they actually do is the most profitable work. And that's ensuring that services, resources are delivered to the folks in our community. And so many of the folks that do that work are from our community. And so the foundation wants to be a partner in making sure that we create sustainable options for community members to have access to food, to have access to services, to have access to resources, to have access to supports, all of the things we need to keep our community strong and thriving.
Yeah. Dr. Porter, I want you to take a moment, because when we talked at the beginning of the show, we talk about this is a show that takes a look at a lot of the inequities that people face. And this pandemic has really highlighted and really driven home a lot of the inequities that people face, particularly in communities of color. Share with us a little bit about how you see these inequities and what your approach is right now.
Well, you know, what we all know is the pandemic, particularly in the Bronx, only highlighted inequities that existed pre-pandemic. And, you know, I say to folks over and over again, if we had a conversation 10 years ago about a pandemic coming to New York City or coming to the world as it would be most disproportionately impacted in those moments. And the Bronx would have been at the top of the list at that point. and remain that. And we know that. We knew that was real. I was sitting in a different seat when the pandemic hit, and it was community-based organizations that stood up when large bureaucracies couldn't, and got devices in the hands of young people, and got food into families' hands, and supported folks who had rent issues. There was so many, just inequities that had existed long before the pandemic that just were exacerbated. And so our work is about, how do we interrupt systemic racism, generational poverty? How do we ensure to build generational wealth in a different way in our community, and see all of the potential and possibilities of the tenacity, the resilience of Bronxites, and support it by bringing resources that haven't been here to our borough through the Community Foundation.
Yeah. I know one of the things we also talk about in our community is the need to pay particular attention to a couple of things. We've got gentrification at the forefront. We've got disinvestment, and even, from a political point of view, we see the gerrymandering of particular districts. How do you see these things, and can you give us a little bit about what you like to see happen and the work that you do?
Well, what I'd love to see happen is that that we shift shift gentrification from gentrifying our communities to create change, to ensuring that the people in our communities have access to new housing, new small business opportunities, and so that we let the folks of the community benefit from all of the amazing resources that are coming in, from the new developments to new business opportunities, that we really create a pathway for community members to benefit from that. And I think that is so important for this community, where, for generations, Bronxites have stood up and said, this is our community, and we're going to remember, we're going to be here, and we're going to be present. I also think it's important that we move towards ensuring that we're providing access to resources in a very real and distinct way. One of the things we're doing is partnering with the Bronx Defenders to build a cannabis hub. And that is the place to ensure that the social justice commitment that was made to ensure those who were justice impacted by cannabis have access to those licenses to create those businesses. And those are the kinds of things that we want to do. We want to make sure that our people, the people who've been here, the people who've raised their families here, the people who've spent generations here, actually benefit from the transformation that's happening across the borough. I say over and over again, if you want to transform New York City, if you want to create a New York City, it starts right here in the Boogie Down Bronx.
The Boogie Down Bronx it is. And speaking about the Boogie Down Bronx, there's a reason that you know that it's the Boogie Down Bronx. You're from the borough of the Bronx, as well as the founders, Desmond and Derek Lewis. Talk to us a little bit about your background and why this has become a burden and a passion for you.
Yeah, so Derek and Desmond, born and raised in the Bronx, and really see themselves as the products of philanthropy, and so have chosen to give back to the community that's given so much to them. I got to be real, because people call me on this all the time. I was born in Queens, but I moved to the Bronx when I was 17. I've been here ever since, raised my family here, and still live here. I'm in the Bronx now. And, I also spent over 20 years in education in the Bronx. And, many of you know my most recent last stint in education was as New York City Schools Chancellor. And I say over and over again that, if not for the people in the Bronx who believed in me, entrusted me with their children, the leaders and teachers who followed my vision to do great work in schools, I would not have been considered as, to take over in the most important moment in New York City. But additionally, I think what's important about both Derek, Desmond, and I is, when you come from a community, when you raise your family in a community, when you live in a community, you understand the needs of a community in a very different way. It's what I call, it's the idea of proximate leadership. Those who are proximate to the problems, those who understand the community, those who understand the unintended consequences of decisions that are made, have the best opportunity to help solve those problems, because you bring folks in who know and understand. And I think that's what's important about us. That's what's important about the foundation. And that's what's important about this moment. And it's even more important for folks who want to contribute to solving community problems, to building strong to identify and see those of us who are of the community, those of us who come from the community as part of the solution.
When we look at what goes on in our community, I know one of the things that we really talk about is that in communities of color, and you know this working in the Department of Education and working in the Bronx school system, that there's so many young people who've been affected in the area of the digital divide, where we don't have access. And it was assumed by a lot of people as soon as COVID hit, okay, well, we'll go home, we'll go to in-person learning. But there's so many people who struggle with internet use. There's so many people who struggle with not having a lack of adequate technology or less than sufficient technology. What do you see right now about that digital divide? Has it been bridged? And what's the Community Foundation doing in terms of trying to step in and really address this matter?
Well, we have to continue to work to bridge it. We cannot allow the gap that exists between people in the world who have access to computers, access to mobile devices, and access to internet. We can't allow there to be a gap between those who have and have not. That can't exist, especially when we recognize that we had to stand up a whole school system, and there were too many young people who didn't have access at that moment. And so what the foundation did in that moment was create a digital equity coalition, a coalition of over 70 community members who looked at ways to address the digital divide. And one of those ways was the launch of the Gigabit Center, which happened in late June with Mayor Adams. And it is a place and a space where community members can have access to digital programming, Wi-Fi, broadband, and all of the things we need to make it a reality. But we must continue to move the work forward. We need to ensure that the Bronx does not have any digital deserts, that divide doesn't exist, but that all of our communities, all of our buildings, all of our housing developments have high-speed internet access on a regular basis. And the foundation is working to continue to do that with many of our partners.
And talk to me about this matter right here, because when we talk about racial justice, one of the things that we're dealing with at the forefront in our community is that. I think when you talk about George Floyd, you can talk about Eric Garner, you can talk about all kinds of different things that we've seen in and around our nation. But when it comes to the New York City, we have seen a large push in the area of racial justice and helping organizations that are actually doing that work, because many times they are often underfunded and they're many times grassroots. Talk to me about how the Community Foundation is wrapping their arms around the racial justice issue and supporting those organizations that really have racial justice at the forefront.
Well, identifying and solving and addressing issues of racial justice are a priority for us. And again, in the Bronx, this is not a surprise. It is not a new thing that occurred because of a pandemic. It didn't occur, because of George Floyd. We had our own stories of young people and men of color being, killed by police officers or in police custody, right? And so we want to bridge many, many gaps. We want to bridge the relationships between community, police. We want to ensure that our elected officials are recognizing on the ground. And we're so proud of the way our electeds are showing up in this borough, and they've been some real partners to say, the Bronx now, we need to ensure that the brownest borough in New York City, because we can't forget that as well when we talk about racial justice. The Bronx is the brownest borough in New York City. We need to make sure that the brownest borough in New York City gets what it deserves. We also want to ensure that we're identifying nonprofits that are doing great work that don't have access to resources because they're not the kind of regular groups that folks always go to, but they're doing great work in the community. The Knowledge House, MASA, there's so many amazing organizations that are doing great work in the community that we need to make sure have access to resources and funding in the way many of the large nonprofits who have been here a long time and have been deeply committed to working in the Bronx have as well.
Yeah, I want to take you back for a minute. I'll put another hat on, just go back to 2021. I remember when Meghan Markle came and you had the opportunity to really sit next to her and have some conversation, have an opportunity to talk to her about students, about things of that nature. Give me a little bit about that moment, because I'm always interested to know how people who are international and those on the outside see our city, see our communities, and particularly a person such as a Meghan Markle. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to her thoughts as to what she saw and
Well, what's interesting is that, what we know, right, like from just the news and social media, is that she's had her own struggles, right, as a Black
Mhm.
woman in this moment, in her own life. And one of the things that what we got to do together was actually share a book that she wrote, a children's book that she wrote with some students actually in Harlem, in a school in Harlem. And what she really talked about was being intentional about writing a book that showed diverse characters, that showed diverse experiences, and making sure that she was bringing that not only to schools and communities across the country, but in her own home as she raised her own family with her own children. And I have to tell you, because you asked, they were both quite lovely, and quite humble in just being honored to be in spaces with young children and in schools, and really honored the adults in that moment who were really doing the most important work.
Yeah. And when you talk about embracing diversity, I think that's really what it's about, right? I think that we have to do a better job of embracing diversity. But unfortunately, in communities of color, that doesn't happen. But with organizations such as yourself and the Bronx Community Foundation, you really have an opportunity to really give those organizations an opportunity to have a foot up. And I tell people all the time, it's really not about getting a handout, is in as much as it's really getting a hand up.
Mhm.
And the work that you're doing really puts people in a place where they can receive a hand up to embrace that one word, right? Diversity.
Yeah. And, I'm with you, right? A hand up, but also a partner who wants to
Right.
support you along the way, who believes in you, who sees you and recognizes the great work that you're doing in the community. And so that's who we want to be. We want to say, we want the world to know, right? Like there's been this narrative about the Bronx that we are excited about changing, because what we know, those of us who raised our families here, live here, grow up here, there is so much diversity, so many different communities that live together, exist together, share culture, food, dance, community, knowledge, education. And, this is the moment, this is the time for the Bronx to really be seen for the potential that lives and exists in this borough.
Well, Dr. Port, I want to ask you the question for Bronxites and those across New York City who want to support the work of the Bronx Community Foundation. How do they go about supporting and being an active participant?
So they should feel free to follow us on social media at the Bronx, on all the handles, but also our website, www the Bronx, we got it, thebronx.org. No one understands how that happens, but just follow us, follow our work. And you'll see, if you go into our social media today, tomorrow we're celebrating nonprofits, like I said, with Deputy Borough President Jeanette Peguero, our comptroller, Brad Lander, and Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, who's also from the Bronx. And so we'd love to have nonprofits join us for that as well, and just look forward to continuing to do great work together.
Well, Dr. Meisha Porter, I want to let you know it's been an honor to have you here on the show, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing at the Bronx Community Foundation,
Yes.
and the great work that continues. And certainly come back and visit us again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Remember
yes.
the Bronx.
All righty. Dr. Meisha Porter, our guest here on the Social Justice Forum. Listen, we want you, don't go anywhere. We've got more show coming up. The Social Justice Forum continues in just a few seconds. Welcome back. For over 40 years, Safe Horizon is the largest not-for-profit victim services agency in the United States. The organization provides support, prevents violence, and promotes justice for victims of crime, abuse, and their families, as well as their communities. Joining me now, we're pleased to have the director at the Bronx Family Justice Center at Safe Horizon, Vilma Torres. And Vilma, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to really talk and highlight the work that we do at Safe Horizon.
Yes, and I know that when it comes to really dealing with victims and victims that can be of abuse and sometimes crime, as we said at the beginning of our segment, it can be a long road and a hard path. But I know for yourself and your organization, you do a great job of trying to make that road to recovery a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I so appreciate what you're highlighting, and you're really highlighting about the connection, especially in our communities, Daren, like to know where the resources are, such as the Bronx Family Justice Center, that people know they're not alone when they're experiencing harm and violence, that there's somebody there, whether it's someone you can pick up the phone and speak to someone in your language, that someone is honoring and respecting your gender and is saying, how can we be of support?
And so for somebody who may not be so familiar with the Family Justice Center, walk us through what occurs at the center.
Yes, so as a result of the pandemic and COVID, folks have two options, anyone who's impacted intimate partner violence, sex trafficking, human trafficking, family violence, or elder abuse can call. You can call the Bronx Family Justice Center and have an opportunity to speak with someone or leave a voicemail and someone will get back to you, or you can walk into the center. And what happens when you walk in is someone welcomes you. Someone is letting you know that you found the right place. Someone is there to engage you. You can provide your name, how you would prefer your pronouns, and really just have an opportunity to be in a safe waiting area where someone can offer you some water, coffee, or tea. And that's always very surprising because someone looks around like, oh, you mean I can have coffee here? It's like, exactly. It's a warm, welcome setting. We know that folks that are walking through our centers have been impacted by violence, abuse, and they want the opportunity to speak to somebody in a very safe and confidential setting. That now I have an opportunity to speak with you. You're going to talk to me about confidentiality, and that's honored and respected, and listen to me, provide that empathy. That continuum of care is what we say as to what brings me to the center today. How have I experienced harm, and what are some of the resources available for me that could be of guidance to me, educating me. What happens if I start to go for an order of protection? What is that about? What's the difference between a criminal court order protection? Well, I have questions about child custody and visitation. I have questions about my immigration status, and I have an opportunity now to speak to someone where you could speak to a case manager who's going to help you sort of navigate. What I mean by navigate is someone's going to start from the beginning to now. What's your priority right now? And it could be as someone is also looking for food resources. What are the food pantries in our communities?
Give me a little bit about right now as we talk about the timing, as we're navigating, many of us feel like we're coming out or getting out of COVID. But what's it been like for you? Have things been further exacerbated during COVID-19 in terms of the legal assistance that's been needed for families? Because I do know there have been so many people, thousands and thousands of New Yorkers who've been on the fringe.
Yeah, I think that's the key word. Sadly, because of the pandemic and the COVID, that people didn't know that the resources were still made available. So the value of having that phone interaction, if someone has questions about when people were experiencing evictions, where people didn't know about what their rights are, because what happens when I'm on a virtual call? What happens if I have questions about immigration, about child custody visitation? Those resources are still available. So someone is going to be picking up the phone and doing an introduction, explaining, well, what are the concerns or questions you have about what does child custody looks like? What does visitation looks like? What happens about that I don't have status in this country? And you know what that feels like? It feels like a lifeline, that someone is speaking to you in a very respectful, courteous manner. Perhaps if you have a language preference, someone speaking to you in Spanish or in French. But can you imagine what that feels like to be well informed? Now I know what my rights are. Now I can make choices, because before I didn't know. And now that I've become well informed, I can really make some safe choices about what are the next steps for me and my family.
Case management is huge, because in order for families to really fully get back on their feet, or a victim to really be able to navigate through this, having a case manager and having case management, really critical. Give me a little insight into your case management program and the impact that it's had.
Well, case management for me, as I'll say, it's that ear, it's that extra ear. So whether it's here at Safe Horizon, whether it's through our Safe Horizon Crime Victims Assistance Program at the police precincts, criminal court, family court, our domestic violence law project, or a 24-hour hotline. It is having that ear. You actually have someone that's listening to you, who checks in, is this a safe number? Are you free and able to speak? What can we talk about? And maybe if it's not, you know what, right now I'm telling you it's not safe. How is that? I'm sharing like a code word. I'm gonna tell you, it got hot in here. And you know what, I gotta pick up the kids from daycare. Now you're saying to me, okay, I'm gonna hang up, and as your case manager, I can call you back where you're safe and able to speak. And it really is people joke, but it is having an extra pair of ears where someone is listening to you in a very courteous, respectful, non-judgmental manner, not telling you what to do, but hearing from you is, what are your priorities? What are the next steps?
And so for yourself, I know that you're very entrenched in a lot of different areas, and the organization's entrenched in a lot of different areas. Unfortunately, in our community, all too often we have to deal with the issue of homicide and those victims and those families. But I know that you also spend a lot of time assisting families of those who've been impacted by homicide and the grief that they share.
Yes, thank you so much for acknowledging that. It's actually coming up in September, National Day of Remembrance for Families of Murder Victims. And think about how the impact it has on our communities where people are literally, how many times are you walking down the street and seeing RIP? How many times
Right.
are you hearing shots? How many times are you sharing with your child why there's still blood resonance and on our streets? And those are families. Those are what I say generations, because it becomes the past, the present, of the future. And I do appreciate the work that our organization is doing and helping someone with compensation, letting them know who the scene cleanup with the New York State Office of Victim Services Compensation. That's an altering experience. That's forever. And when you talk about the grief process, thank you so much for acknowledging that, because someone would say, oh, you know what, I'm going to help you at the funeral, I'm going to do this. But when the grief, the mourning continues for a lifetime. In the beginning, it's just dealing with that traumatic grief, which is the pain and heartache of witnessing, perhaps hearing the shots. Many times I hear from law enforcement that people are hearing death notifications on Facebook, on Instagram. They're not even speaking to the officer or the detectives at that time. So can you imagine someone already just saying, hey, RIP Vilma? What do you mean, Vilma? I just spoke to her this morning. What are you talking about? And that moment, that shock, the disbelief that your life has ended. So to your point, and thank you for highlighting that the grief and the mourning, it's forever, but you're dealing with the missingness of that person 5 years from now, 10 years from now. In the beginning, it's the traumatic grief, the reliving those intrusive thoughts, those images, working with systems, the criminal justice system. Who would think that I would be going to the medical examiner's office? Who would think that I'm burying my child, where that expression we hear from some parents is like, that's supposed to be them taking care of me, Vilma, not me burying my loved one, my son.
And it's very traumatic, and we know that. And so for a family, how long do you stay with them? I mean, you talk about a time period of, people just come and they go right after the funeral. How long has your organization been staying with families after that process?
Well, you made reference to when you said our organization has been around since 1978. Families of Homicide started in 1979. It is that connection now through our community programs, the Safe Horizon, through the advocacy work that are done in the crime victims assistance programs, our work through the district attorney's office and their crime victims assistance unit. It's lifelong. Many of our families stay in touch with us for National Victims' Rights Week. We talked about National Day of Remembrance coming up. I appreciate our organizations and the work that we're doing now about gun violence and prevention and educating. What are the signs and symptoms, to your point, when we're interacting with our communities, our children, our communities of color, where people are saying, well, this is an everyday thing that happens in the South Bronx. It's an everyday thing that happens in our country. But people sometimes will lay blame to it. So what was Vilma doing? Kind of it has to be that Vilma was doing something that led to her murder.
Mhm.
No, it's not. You know what? I could just be walking down the street and waving to you in a moment, and all of a sudden my life has been ended. So that's why I appreciate what you say about the grief from the process. It really is acknowledging that, and and helping families, and that could be for as long as they want our resources and services.
Yeah. We got a couple of months coming up that we talked about before we went on camera. One is September, and you got some things happening in September. Talk about what's the highlight for September.
Well, yes. So when you mentioned families of murder victims, so National Day of Remembrance is coming up in September, but that's just one day. Every day is a National Day of Remembrance for families of murder victims. Come October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So that's why I so appreciate you're highlighting the work that we do at Safe Horizon with our partners and colleagues at the Family Justice Center, community programs, is letting people know that the doors are open. The calls are still being taken, or our hotline. Like, if you need us, we're there for you. And I think that helps when you're dealing with isolation and stigma, and people forget that, that's a lifeline. And you know what? I appreciate you taking the time just to highlight this work and letting people know that you don't have to deal with your pain and your trauma alone. If we can be there to extend a helping hand, we're there.
Yeah. And as we look right now, we know that a lot of people are really struggling for services and really struggling to have a safe environment. It's a work in progress, right? To really be able to be with families and to help families, particularly navigate the legal system and the court system. Our guest earlier talked a little bit about the backlog of courts and how frustrating that could be for an individual or a family or somebody that's needing to get into the court system. What's it been like for you in terms of advocacy? Because I know that there's a lot of things that are still laying in abeyance in the court system. The advocacy component, are you optimistic with some of the things that we're talking about when it comes to victims' rights and survivors' rights that we'll see some soon change from government?
Yes, and thank you so much for highlighting victims' rights. Yes, that is key. We want to honor and respect our criminal justice system, that if I am accused, I want a fair trial. I want that my rights are protected and honored. Everybody has rights and choices. And it's important to know about victims' rights, about compensation. It saddens me when I hear that victims of crime are paying medical bills that they shouldn't be paying. To your point, that if I'm appearing in court, someone is giving me an opportunity to prepare myself. Working with the district attorney's office about cases. To me, I appreciate what you're having is victims' rights. Let's not forget about rights and right of notification, right of compensation, right that someone to be heard, and a victim impact statement. If I've been harmed by as a crime victim, you as the court should know about my financial hardship. Guess what? I had to be out of work. Maybe I'm struggling now to pay my bills. I'm at risk for homelessness because I can't go back to work, because going back to work, I was sexually assaulted at the parking lot, and my office building is right next door to it. Think about what that experience is, walking past that parking lot and entering to go into my building right now. You mean I could get free counseling services? You mean someone is going to help me to get compensated because I was injured? That's all part of victims' rights. So I appreciate that you're talking about it, because it is part of our judicial process.
Yeah. Before we go, please let our viewers know, how can they tap into the resources and the things that you have available through your organization?
Yes, thank you so much for asking. It's the great respect and honor that I have for our hotline staff, our advocates who are literally there 24/7. Our hotline number is the 1-800, which is 621-HOPE. Hope, Esperanza, it really is that key word of hope, Esperanza. And that is 1-800-621-4673, 1-800-621-4673. Because I know I'm part of the Bronx, that's my community, but what if somebody's looking for services in Staten Island, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens? Even, can you imagine, people call our hotline from different states that are looking for services, because it is a 24-hour hotline number. So we'll get someone say, hey, Vilma, can you help this family in Ohio? They're looking for these resources. You may know them. So it really is a lifeline. So thank you so much for highlighting it.
Yeah, and Vilma, I gotta thank you for being with us. That about ends our segment, but I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And of course, as the months continue to go forward, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to bring you back and talk a little bit more and drill down in depth about some of the issues that are affecting these people who are great people, but sometimes find themselves on the other end needing some much needed services. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and maybe the word resilience, as you say. Yeah, there is hope.
Yes,
Thank you, and I thank
resilience,
you kindly.
perseverance, hope, all of those words. Thank you much. And want our viewers to know, stay with us. We do have more here on the Social Justice Forum. And welcome back to the show. Greenfaith is an interfaith coalition for the environment that's working with houses of worship, religious schools, and people of all faiths to help them become better environmental stewards. Now, the organization is building resilient, caring communities and economies, meeting everyone's needs, as well as protecting the planet. And joining us here and sharing more details, we've got the New Jersey organizer of Greenfaith. We've got the Reverend Ronald B. Tuff. And Reverend Tuff, thank you for joining us. And I'll begin with a book that I read that says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And so I know that some of the work that you're doing is really organizing churches as well as community to respect the earth.
I think I'm kind of familiar with that book that you read. And
Yeah.
you got that quote from, and the scripture is very, 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 very true. And it is very, very important that irregardless of what community that you're in, or your wealth, or the position that you're in, you still have the responsibility to care. Not only care for the earth, but care for your fellow man. And that's the position of Greenfaith.
And so talk to us a little bit more about Greenfaith and the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do. So if somebody doesn't know and says, hey, who is Greenfaith? What would you tell them?
Greenfaith was founded in 1992. And it was founded basically as a New Jersey organization. And as you know now, we are international. And the basic work that we do, belief is that irregardless of what you believe, that we can all come together to say that we need to save this planet and we need to save our communities. And as you know, that in the low and moderate and the minority communities is where you have most of the pollution. And that's where my job begins. And my job begins bringing churches, the Black churches together, and or bringing churches together to develop projects in order that to make the community, now this is what I'm saying, make the community aware that they can become involved in saving the planet, and by becoming involved in saving the planet, that they can benefit. One, by cleaning the air. Two, by providing for their families in terms of jobs. As you know, with the three industries that coming out of the climate change: offshore wind, electric vehicles, and solar. Those are key industries that benefit our community. Offshore wind gives the community a chance to not only become educated, but become involved in operating those. You see those big wind turbines in the ocean, and that helps take away some of the emissions that's emitted in our community. Electric vehicles helps take away some of the emissions in our community, and the community can become involved by becoming involved in those industries, i.e., by becoming, because they're jobs. There are thousands of jobs, i.e., becoming certified, becoming educated, and becoming involved in offshore wind, electric vehicles, and solar. And I'm and my job is to bring the churches together to provide the information, so that these communities can become involved in a job training, job readiness, and also making the community aware. We've done projects as the called direct install program, where the I work with PSC&G, the New Jersey Clean Energy Fund, where they become involved they come out to the churches and they replace antiquated boilers. They replace the old lights and they put LED lights in it, and they plug up some of the other holes in the churches, as well as we also have. I've also provided car shows for the electric vehicles, where we bring the electric vehicles right to the community, the electric charging stations right to the community, and say, hey, these vehicles are available to you. And you, not only you can own one, but you can also get a job in manufacturing one of the electric vehicles. So my job is to make the low and moderate minority community aware that there are jobs available, and that these industries benefit the community.
And one of the things that you do also is you have a fellowship program that really engages people in the work that you do, bringing people a little bit closer to the ground to understand how they can really literally be close to the ground and improving the environment. Talk to us about the fellowship program and what that goes and what encompasses that.
Well, the fellowship program they had, I think it was 12 or 13 people, where they gave scholarships. And what they would do is they would come, and it was almost like a yearly program. And basically they would come and they would be assigned various projects in the various communities. And they would work with various church organizations, and they would work with various industries, where not only they could learn as students, but they could also get to know the community, and they also can make the community aware of how they could participate in fighting climate change and how they could work together. And the good part about it is the people that were working in South Jersey, Central Jersey, and North Jersey came together, where they could all work together, and they all came up with various projects. And then at the end of the project, we had a graduation where they came and talked about all the work that they've done.
So for yourself, honestly, really to be able to engage people is a passion of yours. Talk to me about receptivity. Do you find that more and more people are becoming more and more conscious as we talk about climate change, we talk about the environment? Are we finding that more and more people are wanting to become engaged in this particular matter because you're talking and many times about environmental justice, and for a lot of people that's quote unquote not sexy, right?
Let me put it to you this way. You have to sort of kind of approach it is that, hey, we can come together to solve a problem in your community. And sometimes we in the community don't need to be sitting on the outside. We need to be involved from the inside. And many, many times, as you know, our community is not at the table. For example, they're building a truck port in East Newark. Well, what I did was I worked together with the communities that this truck port was going to be built in. And we got together, we organized the tenants, and we got together and we went down and testified at a hearing to talk about, hey, you're going to build this truck port, then you need to talk to the community where people live. So once the community feels that they can become or participate where they have a say-so, now this is new, where they have a say-so in certain projects that are coming to their community, they become energized and they talk to their friends and they talk to the community. And it's a whole different change when the community has a seat at the table, i.e., as well as the jobs end of it. Many of these jobs that you see in the three industries are union jobs. So what we've done, we've organized the community and those that are unemployed, and we went directly to the electrical union, to the masonry union, to the steel workers union, and said, you need to talk to these people who are unemployed, and you need to talk about, number one, apprenticeships. You also need to talk about, after you pass the apprenticeships, how long can you have the job? And you need to talk about work readiness programs. So I met with 30 Black electricians who had been in business almost 30 years. Not one of them had a license. So we went to the electrical union and said, you need to talk to these people. So we're in the process of having the community. And once the community sees that they have a seat at the table, it becomes a priority, and it becomes a priority in their lives. And that's how you get them involved. You say, hey, there's a chair. You need to take that seat at the table.
Talk to me a little bit about fossil fuel. I know that you guys are pretty active in voicing out and speaking about the end of banning fossil fuel. And what's been the if I say I won't use. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, with the price of fossil fuel.
Yeah, the price is pretty steep these days.
Yes. But by the same token, you look at the price of electric vehicles. So once again, it goes back to having a seat at the table. So yes, it's important that we cut down the emissions by the use of the gas-driven vehicles, by the use of electric vehicles, but it also, we have to come to how do we work with the prices in order so the community can benefit and so families can take advantage of this new industry. And it doesn't need to be on, if you're wealthy, then you can take advantage of an electric vehicle. It needs to be, hey, there is a opportunity to, number one, work in the manufacturing of those vehicles, and number two, an opportunity to purchase one of those vehicles.
Well, Reverend Tuff, I want to ask you about right now and the work that you're engaged in. Talk to us a little bit about what is Greenfaith approaching and taking on at this very present moment.
In Middlesex, we're forming a community development corporation, whereas there is a corporation that is in the process of getting the contract to do the electrical hookup for the turbines and the water. And what they've done is they've come to Middlesex County and they said, look, we're going to set up a community development corporation for work readiness, work training, and we're going to we're going to set up this community development corporation, and then we're going to, and if you support us, then we're going to support you. And their initial grant was $1 million for unemployed. And you also remember, many of those jobs, you have to have a college degree or you had to be certified. So we're setting up a program where that the people will get into training in order to get certified for for these industries, to get certified to be in these unions, and also to for work readiness. And this program is coming. The name of the corporation is the New Jersey Offshore Wind and Equity Community Development Corporation, and it's going to be open to Middlesex County residents, Mercer County residents, and others who want to qualify for these jobs in this new climate change industry. So
Are you
that's
sure? Huh?
that's one of the ways. And then the other thing we've done, Greenfaith also has organized what we call Greenfaith circles around the state. We have one in South Jersey, we have one in Central Jersey, and we have one in North Jersey. And what these people do, this is a group of churches who come together and they work on various projects that affect their community. For example, in North Bergen, New Jersey Transit was going to build a fossil fuel driven, it was a energy plant, and the community and the circles came together and fought against it, and they stopped the project. We in South Jersey, we work with the it's called the Right to Know campaign. They have these trains that come through Pennsylvania that carry fuel that's highly flammable. So what the churches have done is come together in these circles, and they went to this state and said, we need to have a right to know law, because if one of them trains flip, and one of them did flip in Virginia, but if one of those trains flip in Virginia, the whole community has to evacuate. So the community came together and the churches came together and went to the government and said, we need to have a right to know law. So when these trains are coming through, we as a group can come together and notify the community. So once again, this is giving the community an opportunity to have a voice in fighting against climate change, but letting the community become a partner and have a seat at the table to protest some of these moves.
Yeah. Give me your perspective on churches. I mean, your responsibility is really to bring churches and faith-based organizations under the umbrella of environmental leadership, environmental justice. Are you finding that more and more faith communities are really embracing this and taking this on as a part of what they do in their ministry?
Yes, I'm working with the Newark Ministers Conference. I'm working with the United Clergy of Oranges. I'm working with the clergy organization in South Jersey, and I'm working with the National Baptist Association. And I've found it to be very, very receptive on the various projects. But not only are the projects beneficial to the community, but they're also beneficial to the churches, because the utilities have a program called a direct install program, and that's where they pay a percentage of repairs in order to bring the churches up to the ability where they can become where their buildings can become ready to be available as it relates to climate change. For example, they've replaced several boilers in at least 6 or 7 churches, and they pay 80% and the churches pay 20%. They've replaced lighting and they put in LED bulbs. So the churches are very, very receptive because it's a win-win situation where the churches benefit as well as the community benefits.
Yeah. Well, Reverend Ronald Tuff, definitely want to thank you for being with us and sharing with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you sharing about the environmental impact that is really affecting a lot of us, and glad to have you be with us.
Yeah, it's very important that the churches get out to their community. And the key thing is you guys have a seat at the table and you guys can determine what happens in your community. For example, down in South Jersey, they had it was down in Salem. They had a situation where they didn't have any bus service. So we got the community together and went to New Jersey Transit and asked them that, hey, these people are unemployed, you need to provide bus service. So once the community and once the churches see that they can unite and come together to fight climate change, and you can see the benefits in the New Jersey circles, there've been programs as it relates to plastics. They've been programs as it relates to the availability of electric vehicles. They've been programs as it relates to the Indigenous People campaign, where there have been permits granted where they can come through the Indigenous people's property. And we've come together as groups in order to fight against this type of involvement. And we've come together as a community in order to fight. And that's the key, knowing that the community and the churches have a united interest to fight against climate change.
Well, Reverend Ronald Tuff, we got to leave it there, but I want to thank you for joining us and sharing with us here on the Social Justice Forum. Thanks much.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, we hope that you, well, I should say to our viewers, we hope that you enjoyed our show today. We've come to the end of it, and I want to thank you for joining and watching. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion on the Social Justice Forums. We encourage you, if you missed any parts, always you can catch the Recablecast right here on BronxNet TV, and then also on BronxNet.org. And anytime you want to join in on the conversation, don't forget to hit us on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We'll continue to elevate the conversation, bring you some more informative guests, and talk about the issues, the inequities that many people face here on the Social Justice Forum. I'm Daren Jaime. Until next time we meet, saying take care and God bless.